moderating this session titled Interdependencies. And we will have Elżbieta Kowalska with us, Amanda Egbe, and Manuela Johanna Covini. So just a few notes if you have been here in the previous session. So each panelist has their disposal 10 to 15 minutes to present. We will have questions at the end. So after 3 presentations, you can write questions in the chat or just raise your hand and say you would like to make a question. To the panelists, I will write you in the chat privately when you are at 10 minutes mark. So I will write 5 minutes left and then 1 minute left. So just keep an eye maybe on the chat so you know where you are at with the time. So yeah, last thing with housekeeping. We are recording this, so if you don't like to appear on the camera, you can turn off simply your camera. I think that's all. Anything else, Matthias, Lucy, others that I forgot? No, on the Hyphen. Yeah, and I'll just tell you that this panel is, I mean, it's very fluid structure we have today, but in a way, this one is looking forwards toward the issue 3, which is dedicated to the theme of ecology. But it's again interlinking and entangling with overflows as well. Okay, so I'll start by introducing the first presenter today. So the first presentation will be by Elżbieta Kowalska. So I'll just briefly read the bio. The title, Kowalska is from the Institute of Theater and Media Arts, Adam Mickiewicz University, Poznan. The title of the presentation is Mapping the Gut Bodies. Short bio is Elżbieta Kowalska is a media theorist with background in visual communication and interaction design. She has finished BA in printmaking and in visual communication at the Art University in Poznan, then MA in interactive media and performance at the Institute of Theater and New Media at Adam Mickiewicz University. Elżbieta has over 8 years of experience in visual art projects, commissions, and strategies for institutional commercial use using various traditional and digital techniques. Furthermore, she explores creative coding implemented into art installations, websites, and games. Building on experience gained on interdisciplinary projects, Elżbieta focuses her work on a critical engagement with distribution of knowledge through mapping. Her goal is to explore new methods of creating spatial representations that are led by spatial and mobility turn. These embodied and cognitive maps, radical cartography, and new media poetics in contemporary art and science influences her writing and projects. Elżbieta, word to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for a brief introduction. I would like also to add, just as you said in the last sentence, that I right now focus on mapping tools, especially on mapping social relations problem. So this is my kind of focus right now for the next 2 years. And I'm very happy to join you today for this experimental process of mapping human microbiome. Just not to lose the side, I need to share the, okay, desktop. Okay, is it working right now? Did I share the, not yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Just give me a second. Okay, it should work now.
Yeah, we see.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, so I will start with mapping the gut bodies with the realms of science. What is science right now saying about our microbiome? And I will be switching between those two terms during the presentation. The gut bodies is the term that Jamie Lorimer uses to describe the helminths that are implemented to human body to reestablish balance inside the autoimmunology system of the patient. So this is the term that he used to describe the helminths therapy. I will be using this term more broadly, applying it to the whole microbiome. And I also like I will be applying it also because I like how it changed the relation of inside the word. So we are not saying about the bacteria, fungi, or archaea, but we are talking about some bodies. It changed the relation through the meaning of the word. So the recent research in medical science claims that we are composed by 1,800 different phyla and 40,000 bacterial species. I just put some names of those species on the presentation. Also, you can see the diagram that describes the connection, the pathway, how the microbiome connect with the brain. The main pathway, which is bidirectional communication network with the brain, is named microbiota gut-brain axis. And this is the way how the medical science is describing those connectivity that is inside human body. So what is very important is the fact that this bacterial commensals, which is the kind of symbiosis, it helps to maintain homeostasis in the central nervous system, and this homeostasis influence, of course, our mood and behavior. As Jamie Lorimer also writes, those connections, entanglements of diverse microbial kin that is inside us is very important, and there is vast interest right now in research and taking care of the human microbiome, because it's related with a lot of different diseases, also those mental ones. As I read before preparing myself for the presentation, the depression and schizophrenia also is related to, I mean, the research that was conducted, it shown it has shown the changes in microbiome of the patient that is different than in the healthy person. That was like in the healthy society, more broader than just one person, of course, more broader research. So Human Microbiome Project shows that great deal of us not us, and depending on whether the research is pinned to human cells or genes, we are composed from 90 to 99% of bacteria, fungi, and another invisible to human eye animals. So we are the diverse microbial kin. The term of symbiosis here is very important. It was attached to the idea of the Gaia hypothesis that was then developed, that was proposed by Lovelock and then developed by Lynn Margulis. And she described the symbiosis as coexistence of living beings of different kinds for mutual benefit. So we are coexisting with our microbiomes, with the gut bodies, to have the benefit from their balance and be balanced ourselves. There is a problem with definition of dysbiosis because the modern science tools can't, like every individual have different story. So there is a problem whether it is always related to the lack of the microbiome, or what should be the percentage of overgrown of pathogens, and whether it is always related to disease. There is this I found this quote that dysbiosis is any change in composition of resident commensals communities relative to the community found in healthy individuals. The possible cause of dysbiosis is related to the diet, antibiotics, to hospital environment, to the whole environment, to the stress, lack of sleep, etc. And the therapy is also, I have mentioned it in the abstract for the open call. I've been also influenced by microbiome dysbiosis. I had small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and I went through the process of diagnosis in Polish, in very specific actually environment. And I've noticed during this process that this therapy is something that it should be very individual for each case, because there are too many factors that should be taken into account while proposing good treatment. So right now I would like to switch into thinking what is the system that I'm trying to map, because microbiome is so entangled with different spheres. It's more for me a talk about the system than just about those bacteria that are inside us. Also, of course, different animals and other animals have microbiomes. So I will just focus on the human being during this talk. There is a theory of Maturana and Varela about autopoiesis systems as a proposal to see living systems as something that has self-producing organization. So the self-producing organization have processes of production which generate its components. There is a somehow closed feedback loop and the recursion that recreates the parts of the system, of the living system. They also create the theory of allopoiesis systems, where the system is searching for its components outside itself. So there is no this recreation within the organization. There is, in the characteristics of autopoiesis systems, is claimed that their organization is closed. However, they adapt to the environment. So I wonder, is it a good comparison whether we should think about human being and the microbiome in the terms of this autopoiesis systems? So the living being that is closed from its surrounding in terms of organization and structure, while adapting to the environment, but adapting through perturbation, disturbance that is in the environment. So both environment that is composed from the systems and this living particular living system, their disturbance is generating change during the time. So after a while, we can consider those living systems as very well embedded into the environment. However, Maturana and Varela also writes that when those disturbances from the environment are too harsh, too big, the living system is just destroyed, it dies, or have problems within its structure. So Maturana and Varela describes the system in this more close way. And I'm very happy to talk about Guattari today, because I think that his approach to the problem is a very interesting one as an opening of the structure. So when he defines ecosophy as something that is constructed between environment, social relations, and human subjectivity, he's showing he's mapping this human subjectivity, human individual in a much broader, open way. He's trying to avoid this fixing into being of human individual into those frames that were proposed earlier, like Heidegger, Dasein. So there is more way of thinking as human as a part of processes, as something that is composed by many different. There are, of course, different writings of Guattari. He wrote also an article about machines, so we can apply also this kind of thinking, this different kinds of processes of machine that compose the whole, whether is it still human individual in this very vivid frame around, like with the skin, with the border, or is it something else? And how it relates to the dysbiosis, to the lack of balance. Whether this lack of balance and disease is creating even a more open system and unexpected system that brings something new and we don't know what it is. We can't, just like there is still problem with defining, treating schizophrenia, depression, and a lot of autoimmunology diseases. We don't know what it brings. The science can't put the easy answer into what is the best therapy. And actually, I'd be like the main point for me from this Guattari way of mapping human subjectivity and actually ecosophy, everything that constitutes life on Earth, is putting pressure on social relations. Because I think that while talking about microbiome, we talk a lot about this individual human being and its relation to environment, to the bacteria, to the diet, air breathed, water drink, to a lot of substances and material in general. But there is too less claims about what social relations, economic, political situation, capitalism is producing all those environmental and also human stress that is, of course, very much related to gut dysbiosis. So while mapping human microbiome, I would like to focus on this particular part of Guattari ecosophy thinking. And there is one quote here from Mark Fisher, Capitalist Realism, where he's writing about some kind of reframing the growing problem of stress and distress in capitalist societies. So from 30 years or so, we can see the great privatization of stress. So this is something that we should deal by our own, but is produced globally, just like the quality of the water, of the air is the product of capitalism. It's the same thing. Sorry, with...
You've got 1 minute left. Can you
okay.
Start wrapping up. Sorry, yeah.
I'm that just the last slide, so I'm finishing. Yeah. So focusing on society responsible for every human being is something crucial for me while mapping the gut bodies. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Elżbieta. Okay, so write down your questions. So we'll have questions at the end, if you haven't heard that part. So now we will listen to Amanda Egbe from the School of Media and Performance, University of Bedfordshire, with the presentation titled Imitations, Representations of Blackness as an Ecology of Images in Cinema and Machine Learning. Short biography. Amanda Egbe is an artist and media lecturer at the University of Bedfordshire. Her research and practice is concerned with the moving image, emerging technologies, ethics, and justice. Amanda's most recent artistic project, Where Were You in 1992, available on 1992.maydayrooms.org, was a collaborative project investigating the rise of racism, fascism, and nationalism in the 90s through archival materials and oral histories. Her research is concerned with the history, design, and application of media technologies, often utilizing archives, repositories, and found materials as part of a participatory visual practice. So, Amanda, please.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Hopefully everyone can hear me. And hopefully my sharing of my screen, my second screen, will work. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect. Yeah,
yeah, great. I have some notes here, and at times I'll be reading from my notes, and at times I'm also going to come in with some clips. And if you can hear a loud fan sound in the background, that's because my computer is overheating. Probably because I have 100 tabs open at the same time. Right. So as you said, I'm at the moment looking at this problem of the representation of Blackness, or the lack of representation of Blackness in audiovisual mediums, in the context of the increased concern over the use of artificial intelligence and the question of racial bias and injustice. This research is concerned with kind of garnering the lessons from film theory, from media studies, critical race theory, and artistic practices, to consider their application to questions of representations of race in machine learning and computer vision. And so it's very much, I started with looking from my own practice, starting with film, thinking about those lessons that that anybody who's looked at in questions of representation, looking at things of feminism and so on, whether they can be applied to machine learning. And I started out in this conversation thinking about the film Imitations of Life. And this is a film which is very well known, set in the 1959 version by Douglas Sirk, around the questions of Blackness. And I really thought about this issue because I saw Laura Mulvey give a presentation years ago, and at the time she was writing the book Death 24 Times, around this theory of delayed cinema. And one of the questions that she looked at, one of the films she looked at, was The Imitations of Life. And in her theory of delayed cinema, she's looking at how digital technology can produce a new type of viewer. So in this work, she's kind of undoing some of the assertions that she made in her kind of renowned essay on visual pleasure. So the idea of delayed cinema is the means by which textual analysis and film theory is able to find meanings not immediately available to the viewer. Quoting her, she says, "The flow of a scene is halted and extracted from the wider flow of narrative development. The scene is broken down into shots and selected frames, and further subjected to delay, to repetition and return. In the course of this process, hitherto unexpected meanings can be found hidden in the sequence, as it were, deferred to a point in time in the future when the critic's desire might unearth them." But there's a problem to some extent with some of Mulvey's analysis. In particular, when she's looking at the scene, which I'll play for you in a second, around an Imitation of Life, she's talking about how it reveals something anew by the ability of technology such as the DVD. It reveals the ability to look at things that you never saw in the past because they were fleeting, they were too quick. And so one of those questions that she raises is one of the scene, which is quite early on in the beginning of the film. where you find your first look, where you see Black characters for the first time. And she says it's really hard to find them, that they're situated in the kind of underpass, in the underground, whereas the great star of the film, Lana Turner, is seen kind of in the bright light. So I'm going to firstly play you the clip, and you can see what I mean by this context of blackness that Morgan's talking about. Sure. So in Mulvey's analysis, she's saying that the detail in the scene is you can only see Annie, the figure who finds the lost child, is the only Black figure that you can see amongst the massive white extras. But in closer scrutiny, the scene reveals how the Black extras both foreshadow and accompany her first appearance. The extras are not only on the screen so fleetingly that it would be difficult, not impossible to register. That you have to slow down the film in order to see the Black characters. And I found this a very troubling statement because when I watched the sequence, I could see the Black characters. I could also note that they weren't all in that kind of underpass, underground of the boardwalk. That in fact there's a rich kind of layered question about interracial couples within the scene. And so it got me to start to think about some of the critiques of this approach to film analysis, particularly from a feminist perspective, on where those problems might lie and whether they are also reintroduced into areas such as machine learning. One of the critiques comes from Gaines, when she talks about the problems sometimes of utilizing film criticism and feminist film criticism, which is inability to look at the sociological reference points and historical detail. So looking at a framework to start to think about how that type of gaze, Mulvey's important for talking about the male gaze, but the critiques of this type of work is also talked about the white privileged gaze, and that being white feminist privileged gaze. Turning to the work of Nero Yuval Davis, her form of intersectionality, and intersectionality is a framework for considering how different social and political identities, such as race, gender and class, disability, can be combined to create unique forms of discrimination and privilege. Yuval Davis's situated gaze, situated knowledge and situated imagination constructs different ways in which we see the world. So for her, it considers as crucial, as she says, the analytical differentiation between different facets of social analysis, that of people's positioning along social and economic goods of power, that of people's experiential and identificatory perspectives of where they belong, and that of their normative value systems. So in situated gaze, there's an attempt to develop a much more complex notion of looking and of seeing. And in this sense, it offers a different way of thinking about those images under the boardwalk that seemingly were invisible on first look to Mulvey, but seemingly not invisible to me as a Black person, as a Black researcher, as an artist. So thinking about these things, about actually that there's a different perspective from which people might be seeing the same context, and thinking about the question of machine learning, there's the added conversation about the coded gaze, which is a phrase which came about by the a phrase that came about by the Joy Boalamwini, I'm going to pronounce the wrong name, terribly wrong, Joy Boalamwini. For her, the coded gaze is a reflection of the priorities, preferences, and prejudices of those who have power to shape technology, which is quite a narrow group of people. The coded gaze is her term for algorithmic bias that can lead to social exclusion and practices. So we can see this occasionally. We can see this in a number of conversations that have come up recently when we talk about machine learning and algorithms that embed injustice and bias into their frameworks. I think one of the most recent ones, the problem on Zoom for discounting Black people because they merge into the background or can't be differentiated from the background if people use the kind of augmented background that comes as standard with Zoom. So thinking about situated gaze and coded gaze, one of the aspects of the work I was doing was to attempt to use machine language, or machine learning, I should say, on the film, and to see whether it noticed things that I hadn't noticed, and certainly that Mulvey hadn't seen. So the sequence here is from a particular software called Runway ML that uses a particular algorithm on object recognition, which is called coded which is Coco SSD. And what's interesting in the use of the images is the way in which this is not facial recognition, as I said, just object recognition, the moments in which somebody is considered a person or not, and the context within this space about how categorization is utilized in machine learning. So these were my concerns, these were my questions. So how could I put this together when thinking about these in the context of, in the first place, producing a kind of video essay on what it is that Douglas Sirk's film does to alert us to these problems or these considerations? And Umwelt is an approach that I had used previously in thinking about technologies such as the optical printer. And the ecologist Jacob von Uexküll offers in this notion of Umwelt a bridge to understanding the kind of immaterial through the notion of Umwelt. So the ways in which we can explore how matter interacts not only with itself, but with the interconnected systems that include organisms. Umwelt is from von Uexküll's notion that each animal has its own distinct perceptual world. He terms the process by which meaning making evolves between an animal and its environment, between animals as semiosis. So von Uexküll expresses his theory in this thought experiment concerning the spider's web. The spider's Umwelt knows nothing of the world of the fly or its environment, and that cannot perceive it. This not knowing extends to the spider's inability to conceive of the fly in terms of its dimensions, for example. There's no one precise fly that the spider can bring to mind in conceptualizing a fly. So Gambon suggests that Taylor would consider the client for measuring a suit that would fix a certain size. Yet the spider is able to determine a web according to the dimensions of the fly's body. The resistance of the threads is proportional to the force of the impact of the fly when flying. The web's threads have many elements that are suited to capturing the fly, including the facets of the web by which the threads are proportional in such a way as to affect the fly's seeing capability. That is, the fly cannot see the threads and so flies into them. The umvelt of the fly and the spider are somehow, however, separate and do not communicate. They cannot see each other's worlds, yet they seem to act in concert. The fly's image, Gambon calls, is their archetype, acts in such a way upon the spider that the web can be called fly-like. The web expresses the paradoxical coincidence of this reciprocal blindness. So, imitation.
Just around 1 minute left.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I wrote in the chat, but maybe it doesn't see.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going between things. So I'll try and wrap up and not show some of these clips. So there was, in the case study of imitation of life, some of the things that were very interesting about Cirque's work were these themes that they came up about the mirror, technology, the family, and solidarity. So there's a way in which part of the film mirrors the circumstances between white characters and black characters. And certainly there's a mirroring towards the end of the film, where from those early scenes we saw of kind of mostly white figures on the beach to the end sequence of this huge funeral for a black character. So this is kind of constant mirroring, this kind of umwelt, this environment where things happen. Not each world is necessarily aware of each other, but the impacting upon these is really significant. Cirque's work is particularly interesting for his use of technology and the fact that the technology is inherent and important. The photographer character in the film is important to locate the notion of how we see and how we look. Another theme within the film, the family, again, is about particular notions of representation and how those are situated both in time, locally, across those intersections of different identities. And one of the ways in which Cirque is able to resolve some of the issues within the film is this question of solidarity. So again, the way in which these worlds seemingly don't link together are able to find some connection, some way of talking to each other, and ways in which their actions are embedded in each environment. And so these are some of the considerations for this, is thinking about in terms of how these questions could be embedded into the questions and concerns of machine language, and how our return to some of the questions of film theory allow us to think much more clearly about what are the problems of machine language and how we might be able to deal with those in the future.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so now we will move on to the next presentation, and then we'll have questions at the end. Third speaker in this session is Manuela Johanna Covini, independent artist, with a presentation titled "The New Village Project, I Have to Change My Life." Manuela Johanna Covini was born in 1960 in Germany, worked a long time as TV journalist in Switzerland. Since 2012, lives and works in Mexico City and Berlin. Covini sees her artistic work as an irritating interaction that tells how life goes beyond its own subjective limits. But her narrations have no clear action. They are more productions, stagings that initially refuse the viewer to orient themselves in time and place. Also important to Covini is to explore the subject of simultaneity in her projects, simultaneity of space and time, of memory and present, of dream and reality, truth and lies. In particular, the digital image allows her to present the dimensions of space and time as a tangible fictional universe in her own visual vocabulary, as an aesthetically resilient material. Okay, Manuela.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
Hello? Okay, before I put the click on the video, I would start directly because I'm afraid that everything I prepared here will break down and the presentation will be totally shitty. Can I do that? So you say yes if it's working.
Yes.
Hello, anyone outside there? Is it already my turn? Am I online? Am I visible? Do you hear me? Sorry, I'm not really prepared. Please tune in. This is a direct delivery from my private cell, here from my intimate booth in Berlin. Tune in these extraordinary times. This weird period where you have to digitalize yourself to be able to participate, to meet people. So hello again.
But before I start, I'd like to say thank you to you, the organizers, especially to Matthias. And I have to apologize too. This is my very first Zoom conference and I have no clue how to handle this. So anyway, let's zoom in. And even if I don't know really how to handle this, I'm kind of happy that I can push here, right here digitally, the boundaries of absurdity and melancholy. You can ask me now why, and my answer for you comes in 3 parts. Part number 1, introduction to purification. I'm sure I do not have to say a lot about the sadness we are living in. I do not have to say much about the crippling feeling of powerlessness, about the anger, madness, alternating between despair and indifference. And I'm believable when I explain that the whole heaviness of this world reaches me anytime and anywhere. We've made it. We are already managed to synchronize our own history with the history of the world. But is this really true? Okay, time is running faster. Everyday life, environment, the circumstances in general are changing almost every hour. There is no chance to live one's life with the very first mindset. That is the quality of this time. Changes and transformations are enforced. And that means my attitude, my point of view, my insight is constantly overwritten. With me or without me, it just happens. But am I more connected with the world? Unfortunately, these overwritings are only working on our verticality. The modern I is still working on going upright and making fire. Of course, I'm not telling you anything new, but the question you can ask me now is how to escape this, and is it about flight?
Havadan kimyaslı
Modernity really invented the loser. Our immune system, as the last free territory, is also occupied now. Great. So, how can I still function in the closed circulation system of my society? What is my job as an artist, as a private individual? Does it still make sense to handle this differently? Today, the production of ourself must be about responsibility, not to be successful in making selfie without a double chin. But by the way, let me make a note on selfie, a selfie. This is controlling the view of others on me. And therefore, only the selfie promises this claim to autonomy.
But back to production of ourselves. Wherever a stage is suspected, we are living our life as a performance. We act as if there is a script, a bigger plot. We are members, followers, friends, consumers, slaves. We work on our identity and weigh ourselves in the greatest personal freedom. And we still think we are the authors. Okay? And now I will talk about illusion, fiction, and psychotherapy. No, I don't want to do that. But to shorten this all up, I realized I had to make some decisions. Now, small ones in my little life, personal things, not only as an individual, also as an artist. And to finally set an example, since many years, I decided to get rid of things I don't need. I'm a nomad, I'm traveling a lot. I need only a few things. One thing I really do not need is electric light. I do not want to label me hypersensitive to electricity like the Swedish painter Andreas Eriksson, who is working only with the light of the day, and he does impressive works. Artificial light in a room annoys me. I don't have any physical discomfort, or I'm not aware of it. I only don't like the quality of electric light, its temperature. Those lights are always too warm or too cold, so far away from useful. And nothing compares with the light of the day. And even if the day is gray, and on gray days, I can make fire. Now, in my tiled stoves, in my small house in the countryside outside Brandenburg, where villages became deserted because grandmas and grandpas died lonely, and the youngsters already seeked for their happiness in the big cities. In this silence there is my new home, an old renovation-needed little house with no electricity, but with a huge garden. Part number 3, a human action can be upgrade the soil. My small house, so many things to do and so many things to think about how I do it, so many things to learn. And I learned from my new neighbors. They had to show me how to make a good and working fire, to heat up the Badeofen, to have hot water for my shower. Making a good fire is not easy at all. And what skills should I strengthen? How to collect wood? Reading the weather report directly from the sky? How to take care of each drop of water? A lot of human actions. And a human action, of course, brings me to Joseph Beuys. Beuys propagated with the term social plastic, an art concept that includes human action, which is geared towards structuring and shaping society. I am deeply impressed by his honey pump at the workplace. The big installation at Documenta 6 in 1977, where 150 kilos of honey were pumped through a hose system installed in several rooms. A big technical arrangement as a metaphor for a diagram of a human being. But as I said in the beginning, we live in sad days, and the sister of crisis is tragedy. So today, we voluntarily deliver our creative honey to internet companies such as Google, Facebook, or Amazon. Our computers, smartphones, online speakers, fitness wristbands load much of our data onto the servers of these companies. Even rental bikes and e-scooters collect our movement data. Every click, every like, every photo posted, and every online comment from us is a nourishment for these companies of surveillance capitalism. So let's make a full stop and back to the idea that we all contribute through our fertile energy to a collective creativity. And this creativity is the real capital and potential of society. Also, Peter Sloterdijk speaks again and again of this anthropotechnical turn. The central idea of his book, You Must Change Your Life, from where I have stolen the title, is that man, as a lifelong practitioner, creates himself through practice. Exercise, says Sloterdijk, is a compression and condensation of all kinds of religious teachings. Sloterdijk reminds us that people can become aware of their possibilities, that the individual can grow beyond himself and ultimately succeed in self-optimization with his own inherent will. Oh, self-optimization, what an ugly word. And how we smell self-exploitation in it. Well, any dislike is legitimate. We tolerate too much. So I hope you can see me now. So, hello, okay. Do you still hear me?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Okay. So I'm done. I can share this time, this leftover time with the others, because I really wanted to break it down. I could tell you about my love for the planet 2 days, my whole life, but I'm done. Okay.
Okay. Thanks so much, Manuela. Okay. So we can now flow into discussion, questions and answers. Anyone would like to pose a question to any of the speakers or to all three of them? It's okay. Also, we can settle down for it. It was really interesting and a lot to take in. So we can take it slowly. Okay, so Monica says, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you. I think everybody can hear me.
Fine. Yeah.
Thank you very much to all of you. I'm having a question for Elżbieta, because I very much anyway like the idea of the microbiome. And did I say it right now? Sorry. And you mentioned the operational closure when talking about the autopoietic system of Maturana and Borella, and you kind of seem to question it. I think which would make, in my opinion, sense, because in relation to the microbiome, that you also talked, or you also hinted at the mutability and the permeability of the gut, so to say, as by hinting at the disease and how what bacteria we establish in our gut through eating, through stress, etc. We influence basically the system. So yeah, that was it. Sorry, I have not something in my throat.
Elżbieta, would you like to respond to that?
Well, yeah, it's very it's a very interesting process of thinking for me. I get after the while to this notion of autopoietic and allopoiesis systems. And I wanted to respond to that because I had this my personal experience. It's really strange to go from mapping my own experience then to move to those theories, because that was the way how I was thinking. How was this lines of flight created? And yeah, I really do think that microbiome is a very complicated system that is so widespread that Guattari's thought about ecosophy here suits very well. I also wanted to take notion on the process of mapping, actually, because yeah, from one point of view, when we create the map, when I look at the map, I lose this other way of perception, right? The map creates this some kind of it creates different kind of representation, so we lose sight from some things and we see something different. This is the Laura Kurgan thought about mapping, but I think that this mapping process is very important one to somehow localize yourself within the problem. So yeah, it was very interesting for me to try to localize all those components. However, I feel lost very much, and I don't have the science background in it, and yeah, my position is determined by very individual case. So I think that it's important to create different kind of representation. Diversity of the representations of the problem is something that that we should put emphasis on. Yep, that's all. Thanks.
And we've got a comment and a question by Andreas Philippopoulos Michalopoulos. Shall I read? So yeah, wonderful, Manuela. Love the flow. Andreas also loved Amanda's revisiting of the film and the question of positionality of persons, which has confluenced with Kasturi's earlier presentation. Common question for Elżbieta: is there any reason to go either or for autopoiesis and Guattari? The two have always seemed very proximate to Andreas, and the combination of the two might be very powerful. Do you want to come back to that, or?
Well, yeah, while I was reading Guattari, he is also mentioning autopoiesis and allopoiesis systems, and he's proposing the way of combining those two. So there is not only the organism that is recreating itself, but it is recreating something else from some other parts, is mutating. So this kind of combination is, yes, it is very complicated, very complex, and very powerful for sure.
Yeah. I had another question, but I'm not sure. Who is it? Is it for someone specific? Roswitha, do you want to clarify? Are you there?
Okay.
Yeah,
this is this question about life on Earth produces pressure on social relations.
Sounds like a question to everyone, all three presenters.
For sure.
Yeah, I'd like actually maybe to pick. Sorry, yeah, please go ahead.
No, I mean, I think in different ways we all commented on that. I would say I think that the point that I'm trying to look at the moment in the way in which certain new types of technologies impact us in a number of different ways, and vice versa. So that the fact that the type of life that we have requires us to use certain types of tools. And because at the moment I'm kind of looking at this conversation of the audio visual and how we use it and how it proliferates our life and calls our attention, and how much pressure that causes, because it continually narrows down our viewpoint and our existence. So the inability to think about the materiality of the things that we do, and their impact. And so when I was thinking of the notion of ecology of images, it was also to look at that question of bringing back that material trace, and that being the impact is both ways. I was trying to find a way in which we could really think about how we can resist how things like artificial intelligence are slipping their way into our existence and making us have to respond to them, as opposed to us being able to say, this is how we would want to live our lives. So raising the questions that Manuela has raised in her film, in a sense, constantly thinking through what it is that we do, how we see, how we look, the history, the context, the feeling, the space, and that the need to have time to do those things, whereas there are lots of different ways in which both social relations and the nature of capitalism and so on forces not to take those time, and how we can re-embed those things both into artistic work, but also back into the methods and approaches in which we live and think.
I agree. I do agree, Amanda. Yeah. We have to disconnect us a little bit from everything. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a comment from Jan. There seems to be a link between the microbiome and the Umwelt, or the Unwelt, and building solidarities. I can try to elaborate verbally, but wondering if any of the speakers might be able to see and articulate possible links as a means to solidarity building.
Well,
Sorry,
can I try to elaborate? Actually, because I feel like my question is, I feel like my thought isn't actually that clear, so I'm kind of like picking at something here. But I think it was something I was thinking about, this idea of the microbiome and this, you know, what is even the me if I'm constituted of these many different organisms? Like, where's the me in that? And then somehow if that gets sort of scaled up, so you know, the individual human might be an Umwelt for any of these microorganisms. But then if that was sort of scaled up and understanding the human as part of this larger, you know, the society is sort of the Umwelt. And I think I'm interested in this idea of the Umwelt, which it was meant to be Umwelt, not unwell. My autocorrect, sorry. But this is something I'm like, how do you get these different worlds to see one another? And there seems to be some sort of overlap between like these ways of thinking. Like, what is the individual society? What is the individual anyway? How these things sort of fit together. And I wasn't able to sort of think it out myself, but I was wondering, since, you know, you guys are working on this, if you see any of these things as a means to solidarity building.
Do you think, I will respond in question, sorry, Diane, that your question is about solidarity building with non-humans or between like social relations, human social relations?
Both, absolutely, all of the above. I mean, I wouldn't restrict it to just humans, but certainly amongst humans, but beyond that as well.
Can I mean, sorry, please carry on.
No. Let's you talk first. It's okay.
No, I mean, I was going to say, I think I really like Douglas Sirk's work, because I think he's really serious about the question of solidarity. and really serious and of saying, you know, I make this Hollywood film which is going to speak to a certain type of audience, and I'm locked within the kind of Hollywood system, which requires me to have a star, which requires me to do certain have certain approaches to making a film. Yet you know, and you know, so many times considered you know, an irrelevant filmmaker because it's melodrama and it's the family drama. But to take a number of differences and to spin them together, and yet to say you don't have to understand all of them, but you don't have to see necessarily from that perspective, but you can have this kind of umwelt of a feeling for it, and thus a sense of somethingness in myself and in the world, and then I will have solidarity with it. And I think solidarity is a really important word for us to be able to take action, and not be in a situation where we just kind of go, oh, it's really bad. It's really bad. It's terrible. I can talk about how terrible it is, but I don't take any action. And this is the conversations which sneak in very much to things like artificial intelligence, where there is an attempt to say these are simple categorical questions. You know, there's a certain type of real or a certain type of object, and we're just focused on that, and we don't have to look at those layers and depth, and understand them in their complexity, which is that they don't always join up. But because at that point you recognise that humanity is not the centre of the universe, and I think that's the point we were making around it not just being about humans but non-humans, as a really important point, and something that we rarely address, I think, in some of the elements of certainly moving image culture, what that might mean. We go to one area of apparatus theory or the technology, or into the so-called social, cultural, but really connecting those things together, I find is a difficult thing. But that was just my meandering into trying to answer that particular type of question.
I think that's a very important notion. I was thinking about, while thinking about human and non-human relations connected with microbiome, there is this big term care, and caring about those processes that happen around us. And I think it's very difficult in terms of many of us to take care about something that is that unknown, and also we are not educated about those bacteria and a lot of biological processes that happen to us. So we don't know how to cooperate, how to deal with it when for example, dysbiosis comes. And while I was putting more focus on the social relations among humans, building solidarity is crucial here, but it's also very hard. My own experience was very connected with being in pain, and as I was connecting with other people that has some kind of problems with microbiome, it also turned out that they are putting so much care that is long-term care about the body, because this restoration, this putting together microbiome into balance is a very long process in many cases. So those people, I think, are so into taking care of those inner processes that they are partly disabled in being active in social relations. And this is something that is very visible. So they are excluded because of their problems into taking part into social interactions, which also means like taking some political and economic actions due to their condition of the health, which relates, of course, to many health problems.
Thanks.
Diana, are you going to?
I mean,
Diana, are you going to say something?
I could go on, but I feel like I don't want to steal the floor. No, I think I'll leave it. I'll leave it because I feel like can't quite formulate things clearly in my head around it. I feel like there is some not being able to understand another being's sort of worldview, as it were, on a range of scales. Sort of does seem like a barrier. I guess another thing I was thinking about actually through this is there's this book called The City and the City by China Millville, I think, and it's about these two cities that are forbidden from seeing one another, and it's sort of it's a narrative that keeps coming back to me as this a very sort of familiar condition is like this inability to see things that are right in front of you, and that I guess that's maybe one of the connections between I was thinking between sort of the range of scales of the microbiome and also the scaling it up to sort of the humans. I'm not sure if it's making sense though, so maybe I'll just leave it. Sorry.
Maybe I can follow up actually, because yeah, I was definitely thinking throughout about this, and I'll try to make this short. But I think that staying with the word solidarity, which Amanda invoked here, I think it's kind of then it really opened up to me the different links between the three, but also differences, of course. But also I really appreciated how each of the Elżbieta, Amanda, Manuela actually really took on critically, you know, very different frameworks, but such as autopoiesis or basically the coded gaze, the question of coding and AI, and then also anthropotechnics, but also at the same time throughout there was like some kind of understanding, I think, also symbiosis present. And I wondered if we go back to solidarity, actually I think it really opens up a really important space to address some huge issues looming within like many discourses, but I would say not only with ecology here in a way. So what I mean by that is that actually to my knowledge, it's actually never or ever very rarely used in the thinking about life on the side of even humanities, thinking through biology and so on. Even Lynn Margulis actually, when she speaks about symbiosis, of course, as coexistence for mutual benefit, I'm not sure she does use word solidarity. So I think there is something special there. And actually, of course, solidarity comes from another trajectory. And I wonder also how it relates, and it does not relate to care, which has been much more present in the recent and discussions around life, of course, also within the realm between humans and our environments and our non-human bodies and partners. So I wondered also how solidarity here actually, I think for me at least, very strongly resonates with the fact that actually it really also, again, in a way, it is affirmatively pulling us into thinking these different issues such as ecology of images, such as technology and so on. But at the same time, I think it's really, for me at least, moves the territory into some, it pulls us into a Black tradition, socialist tradition, feminist tradition. Also, I have to mention third world and non-aligned traditions here. And of course, at the same time, while doing so, it also exposes very many different blind spots, of course, and difference in discourse. But I think solidarity really is powerful here. And I would like to maybe again, yeah, I don't know, I just thought because it does again bring something more than the question of shared interest, which is the one way of thinking about it. I read an article about solidarity in public health ethics, and they were going to different definitions, and one of the main ones is, in a way, shared interest. But again, it's not really that. It can be many different things, and I think it just opens a very, very important space to think the politics and ethics today between also. Yes, sir.
Could I? Sorry, this is it's Jenny. Hi.
Okay.
Could I ask something? Hi. Could I just ask something about Amanda? Because Amanda, I think you're talking about invisibilities and visibilities. That you mentioned Nira Yuval Davis and the situated gaze, and I wonder if there was anything more that you felt was important on that, because I think that you're talking about the Umwelt and that things existing, the spider and the fly existing side by side, but not actually seeing each other, although being affected by each other, which I think in this current climate is really important about that, actually we're being affected by things, by people, but we're not necessarily seeing them. I just wondered, that was a question I had about that.
Ginny, I mean, it's right, and it's the point why I couldn't go with Umwelt by itself as a framework, or felt I couldn't. Talking about the question of kind of racial injustice, where this project is very much coming from, and the questions of Black Lives Matter, or the questions of, white privilege, what can you do in the face of racism if you are not of colour in that sense? And imitations of life is a really interesting question because it talks about passing. It talks about race being a construction and not a reality, other than how we abstract in particular ways for as a question of power. And so the question of situated gaze is important because it's situated gaze, knowledges and imaginations. And to be able to extend this to a range of practices and understandings of being in a given space at a given time, of talking about topology, of talking about history. And on the one hand, it seems like it's a lot of work to take into account that the reason why somebody does something is because of their class, because of their race, because of the part of the world in which they live in, because of the house that they live in, whether it's concrete, whether they have a garden. All these types of things have to be considered. And we can consider them, actually, very quickly as human beings. And the question is to be asked when we don't consider them. And what I love about this film, Imitation of Life, is that he just opens up this question, right? He says, at the end, you have this character, there seems to be solidarity between the white woman and the Black woman. And yet, at the end of the film, when the Black woman dies, the woman's like, I didn't know you had friends. It's incredible. She lived with her for her entire life. It's her housekeeper. And she didn't know what her life existed at. And that's the beautiful ending of this huge funeral, which shows one picture, not all pictures, of African-American existence. I say African-American because it's not Black existence, it's one particular take on Blackness. And it says about invisibility and visibility, but it also says you didn't ask the question. You never asked the question. It's really simple. You just never asked the question. And part of the questions of situated gaze of Umwelt is about, you may not have all the information, but you do have an inkling. And you do have a sense that when I step on the ground and I have resistance, I may not understand what that is, but I know that there is something. And that is the kind of phenomenological, that is the wider cultural thing that I think we need to embed when we continue to talk about technologies and moving in it. So that, I think you're right, Ginny, it's those added frameworks which was needed, particularly talking about situated gaze. That was very important.
Thank you, Amanda. We have a question by Harshavadan Bhatt. Please, Harsh.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks so much for these really amazing presentations. I had a question for Amanda. I mean, forgive me if it's if it's not perfectly framed, because it's slightly it's this subject matter is completely out of my reading list, and it's I've been reading some of Ramon Amaro's work, who was recently a part of a conference that some of us organized, and Rua Benjamin's work, and there seems to be quite a bit of insistence from certain, I don't know, I mean, if I dare call them Afro-pessimist circles, that talk about autopoiesis and the AI machine in its zone of abstraction that has this opportunity to sort of to feed it into a different direction. It's not necessarily this zone of hope, but it's this it's almost this description of stupidity and how the infrastructure somehow can be occupied by different current. But I was wondering how I mean clearly there's a link between what you're talking about and what I think they're talking about. But I'm just wondering how cinema relates to that, if it does at all. I mean, I'm just wondering if there are connections there of images and yeah, I mean between the large sort of discourse at the moment that seems to be around AI and zeros and ones, and yeah, thanks.
Okay, so I mean, this liberty taken, which I start from film, so that's always going to be my basis at looking at everything else. But it's the fact that let's look at where we understand where images come from, or how we learn to read images, and cinema, television, have a huge impact about how we read images. So it would be, you know, computer science sees itself in many worlds and sees that itself has become an explanatory, you know, system for lots of things, but it feeds off of the fact that to make a certain understanding of something, one object, one image next to an image, create meaning. That's a whole history of cinema and kind of audiovisual history that you can't just discount. But it's discounted because my belief is a part of that conversation is about who has the right to the document, and who has the right to say this is a document and this is real, or this is worth. And I think we are in for an almighty battle in a whole range of places around artificial intelligence claiming authority over what we call documents. And I come from a background of looking at film archives and looking at the problems of gatekeepers of archives, and so that's the other reason to look at artificial intelligence and moving image. I'm optimistic about every technology, and I think film technology had its ability to deal with a whole bunch of problems and not embed discrimination and biases, but it does. So it is presumed that AI will suddenly not have that is a bit crazy. But I think it requires, as in almost every mode of knowledge, the ability to look at it in a layered approach. And so the AI conversation are interesting because you have, you know, there is a lack of understanding between the difference between what machine or computer vision is, how we read images, and say textual analysis and a whole bunch of other forms, you know, of AI. There's a potential that it can go over everything, and that the histories of those particular areas in which they're in, or the disciplines, can be subsumed into computer science, and that we just ignore the rest of the history. And I think that's a big problem, which I'm trying to, in some ways, go and look at what film history can lend to the conversation of AI. It doesn't always fit, but I think it's important to do that work. So.
Thank you. We have just about time for maybe one last question, comment, or anyone? Okay, so maybe we should wrap up. Although, I mean, I would have more questions, but I hope we have, we'll continue this in some shape and form. But yeah, just briefly, I really thought, yeah, it's again the question of representation in some way, and it's kind of just in a way with AI and the whole infrastructure around it, both human labor-wise, bodily-wise, and also Earth-wise, and all the kind of complexity that goes into it. Now that the whole Earth is finally kind of being put up into a box, I just think that actually the question of representation, which again is a Black question, is a feminist question, and socialist question, again, it amplifies itself again in such a dramatic way. But again, I'm also I'm a bit in a way optimist, because in a way, yeah, in some ways, maybe if this discourse is around, as you say, computer science and so on, actually we are not prepared very often or at all to deal with this, whereas the question of representation has, you know, we've been discussing this in many different ways and so on for a very, very, very long time. So that's something I think also, yeah, I wanted to add, because it's again has to do with biology and representation of genome as well, which again is this hunt for the, you know, let's map the life and so on, and also the question of just understanding life as in terms of computing in general, which is again another very important, I guess, discourse, which is still underpinning a lot of research and thinking and politics. Okay, well, thanks so much, Sarah. This was, I have to say, at least from my point, really inspiring and actually even empowering to think. So now we'll take a, thank you, Amanda, thank you, Elżbieta, thank you, Manuela, and to everyone who was with us, and everyone who commented and listened. So now we'll take a short break.